In the spring of 1943, British victory gardeners faced a silent crisis. The government was urging them to plant millions of vegetables and fruit bushes to prevent national starvation. But there was a problem. The chemical industry had been commandeered for the war effort. The synthetic compounds usually used to stimulate plant growth were being diverted to make explosives and medicines for the front lines. Yet, records show that home gardeners propagated millions of plants that year. They turned single berry bushes into hundreds of clones. They established orchards from mere cuttings. They did it without the white powder you buy at the garden center today. They did it without plastic bottles of cloning gel. They used a method so effective that it was considered common knowledge for 3,000 years, and then systematically erased from the collective consciousness in less than 50. This secret didn't come from a lab. It came from the riverbank. Today, if you walk into a nursery to buy rooting hormone, you are buying a synthetic chemical called indole 3-butyric acid. It is petroleum-based. It is expensive. And it is a poor imitation of the biological reality. The nursery industry is built on a simple economic model. You buy a plant, it dies, or you want another one. You come back and buy again. They sell you the finished product. They do not want you to own the factory. But there is a tree growing in almost every ditch in North America and Europe that contains the genetic code to unlock infinite plant multiplication. It allows you to take one apple tree and turn it into an orchard for $0. It allows you to clone your favorite tomato plant endlessly. This is the story of willow water. And the reason you're buying rooting hormone instead of making it is because a population that can clone its own food supply is a population that stops being a customer. In this video, we're uncovering 10 propagation secrets that the chemical industry replaced with products. Secrets that turn your garden into a self-replicating machine. By the end, you will understand why your grandmother never bought tomato seedlings twice. To understand why this secret was buried, you have to understand what propagation actually is. When you cut a branch off a tree and stick it in the ground, you are asking it to do something miraculous. You're asking stem cells to transform into root cells. This process requires a hormonal signal. The plant needs a trigger to tell it that it is no longer a branch reaching for the sun, but a root searching for water. In the 1930s, scientists isolated the hormones responsible for this switch. They called them auxins. Immediately, chemical companies figured out how to synthesize them. They created indole 3-butyric acid, IBA, and naphthalene acetic acid, NAA. They bottled them. They patented the delivery systems. They created a market where none existed. They told gardeners that nature was too slow. They told them that without this white powder, their cuttings would rot. They created a dependency on a synthetic product to perform a biological function that plants had been doing on their own for millions of years. The World War II gardeners proved them wrong. They didn't need the synthetic trigger because they had the original source. They knew that nature had already concentrated these hormones in a specific place, waiting to be harvested. The willow tree, Salix, is an evolutionary anomaly. If a willow branch snaps off in a windstorm and falls into a river, it doesn't just rot. It floats downstream, washes onto a mud bank, and instantly roots. It refuses to die. The willow is packed with massive concentrations of natural indole butyric acid, the very hormone the chemical companies are selling you. But it is most concentrated in the growing tips of fresh, green branches. World War II gardeners harvested these twigs. They stripped the leaves. They chopped the stems into 1-inch pieces and soaked them in water. They weren't making tea. They were extracting a biological signal. The water leached the hormones out of the wood. When they watered their other cuttings with this willow water, they transferred that aggressive will to live into fragile plants. They took the survival mechanism of a weed and gave it to a fruit tree. It wasn't just good for plants. It was a genetic instruction override. And it was free. Number 3, the salicylic defense. There is a second reason why modern rooting powders fail where willow water succeeds. When you cut a plant to clone it, you are creating an open wound. That wound is an entry point for bacteria and fungi. Most cuttings don't die because they can't root. They die because they rot. Synthetic rooting gels often contain fungicides to stop this, but the willow tree solved this problem eons ago. The bark of the willow contains salicylic acid. You know this compound. When synthesized, it is called aspirin. In the human body, it reduces pain and inflammation. In plants, salicylic acid is a stress hormone. It triggers the plant's systemic acquired resistance. It boosts the plant's immune system to fight off infection. When you soak a cutting in willow water, you aren't just telling it to grow roots. You are bathing the wound in a natural antiseptic. You are protecting it from the rot that kills most amateur propagation attempts. The chemical industry sells you a hormone in one bottle and a fungicide in another. The willow tree gives you both in the same branch. There is a second reason why modern rooting powders fail where willow water succeeds. When you cut a plant to clone it, you are creating an open wound. That wound is an entry point for bacteria and fungi. Most cuttings don't die because they can't root. They die because they rot. Synthetic rooting gels often contain fungicides to stop this, But the willow tree solved this problem eons ago. The bark of the willow contains salicylic acid. You know this compound. When synthesized, it is called aspirin. In the human body, it reduces pain and inflammation. In plants, salicylic acid is a stress hormone. It triggers the plant's systemic acquired resistance. It boosts the plant's immune system to fight off infection. When you soak a cutting in willow water, you aren't just telling it to grow roots. You're bathing the wound in a natural antiseptic. You're protecting it from the rot that kills most amateur propagation attempts. The chemical industry sells you a hormone in one bottle and a fungicide in another. The willow tree gives you both in the same branch. Sometimes the old ways didn't use willow alone. During the war, when commercial sealants were unavailable, propagators used another household staple to protect the wound of a new cutting: honey. Raw honey is naturally antibacterial and antifungal. It creates a seal over the cut stem, preventing air bubbles from entering the vascular tissue, which would kill the plant instantly, while keeping pathogens out. The combination was potent. Dip the cutting in willow water to absorb the hormone. Dip the tip in honey to seal the wound. Stick it in the soil. This two-step process had a success rate that rivaled modern commercial nurseries. But you cannot sell honey as a proprietary gardening product. It is too common. It is too cheap. So garden centers replaced it with petroleum-based sealants and antifungal powders. They replaced a food-grade solution with a toxic one, simply because it could be branded. Timing is the variable that the industry tries to erase with chemicals. They sell you extra strength hormones that promise to root anything at any time. This is a lie of convenience. World War II gardeners understood the softwood window. This is the precise moment in spring when new growth is still flexible but just starting to harden. The auxins in the plant are at their peak natural flow. If you take a cutting during this window, the plant wants to root. It is biologically primed. By observing the season rather than forcing it, they achieved massive success rates without strong chemicals. The modern instant gratification gardening culture sells you products to bypass nature's timing. They tell you that you can force a dormant plant to wake up with enough chemistry, but the resulting plants are often weak. The World War II method worked with the calendar, producing trees that were synchronized with the seasons, not fighting them. But what about winter? What about the dormant season? This is where the trenching method came in. In the autumn of 1944, nurseries were short on staff. They couldn't baby millions of cuttings in heated greenhouses, so they used the earth. They took hardwood cuttings, sticks of dormant wood from grapes, currants, and figs, and buried them upside down in trenches of sand deep below the frost line. This kept the cuttings dormant but alive. The callus, the scar tissue necessary for roots to form, would develop slowly over the winter in the dark, damp soil. When spring arrived, they dug them up and planted them right side up. The roots exploded instantly because the hard work had been done underground. No electricity, no heating mats, no misting systems, just the thermal mass of the earth and the patience of the seasons. Today, we buy electric heating mats to replicate what 6 inches of dirt does for free. Some plants refuse to root from cuttings. They are stubborn. Modern agriculture solves this with tissue culture labs, cloning plants, and sterile agar jelly. It is high-tech and inaccessible to the home gardener. The old method was air layering. Instead of cutting the branch off, you wound it while it is still attached to the mother tree. You wrap the wound in damp moss and wrap that in oilcloth. Today, plastic. The branch is tricked. It thinks it is underground because it is dark and moist. It pushes out roots into the moss. Once the roots are thick, you cut the branch. You have a new tree that is already 2 feet tall. This method allows you to clone massive fruit trees in a single season. It bypasses the fragile seedling stage entirely. Nursery catalogs hate this. They want to sell you a whip, a tiny stick that takes 5 years to fruit. Air layering gives you a fruiting-sized branch in 3 months. It is the shortcut they don't want you to take. There's a class of plants that are immortal if you understand division: rhubarb, asparagus, chives. These plants grow from a central crown. Every few years, that crown gets too crowded. The plant starts to suffer. The solution is violence. You dig it up. You take a spade or a knife and you cut the plant in half, then into quarters. You replant the pieces. 1 suffering plant becomes 4 thriving plants. During the Great Depression and World War II, this was how neighborhoods fed themselves. One family with a strong rhubarb crown could supply the entire block. It was a decentralized distribution network. Today, nurseries tell you to buy new crowns. They don't tell you that your neighbor's overgrown plant is actually a dozen free plants waiting to be liberated. They monetize the lack of community. Potatoes are usually grown from seed potatoes, tubers held back from the previous year. But in 1943, potatoes were food. You couldn't afford to bury good food in the ground, so they used eyes. They realized you don't need the whole potato. You just need the tiny dimple where the sprout emerges. They would peel the potatoes thick, saving the skins with the eyes, and eat the center. They planted the peelings. As long as there was a sliver of potato flesh to feed the initial sprout, it grew. They essentially grew food from garbage. They ate the potato and planted the skin. Modern seed potato companies sell you whole, pristine potatoes for planting. They tell you that you need the energy reserves of the whole tuber. It is an upsell. You are burying calories you could be eating. The biology requires only the eye and a scrap of starch. This is the secret that could bankrupt the tomato seedling industry. A tomato plant is a vine. It wants to root along its entire stem. Every time a sucker shoots out from the joint of a branch, that is a potential new plant. Gardeners are told to prune these suckers and throw them away to focus energy. The World War II gardener pruned them and stuck them in water. In 3 days, the sucker has roots. In 2 weeks, it is a flowering plant. If you buy 1 tomato plant in May and you propagate the suckers, you can have 50 tomato plants by July. You can clone your best producer. You can stagger your harvest so you have fresh tomatoes until the snow falls. Nurseries sell you a 6-pack of tomatoes for $5. You only ever needed to buy one. The entire business model of selling annual vegetable starts relies on you throwing away the clones that the plant produces for free. These weren't just gardening tips. They were survival strategies developed by people who couldn't swipe a credit card to solve their problems. And here's what the agricultural industry doesn't want you to understand. These methods aren't just quaint or old-fashioned. They are biologically superior. A plant rooted in willow water establishes a natural immune system that a hormone-dipped plant lacks. A tree grown from air layering has the maturity of its parent. A potato grown from an eye is efficient. The chemical industry spent 80 years convincing us that propagation is difficult, that it requires a laboratory, that it requires a white coat and a bottle of gel. They manufactured complexity to sell you the solution. They want you to be a consumer. A consumer buys a tomato. A consumer buys a fruit tree. A producer buys one and never buys another. The willow trees are still growing by the river. The honey is in the cupboard. The science hasn't changed. The next time you walk into a garden center, remember, you are walking into a store designed to sell you things you can make for free. If this knowledge matters to you, subscribe now. We are digging up the manual they tried to burn. I'll see you in the next video.